In a world where hustle culture collides with wellness warnings and workplace demands keep evolving, how do we stay sharp without burning out? How do we navigate the endless stream of wellness trends while actually getting results? This is the Work and Wellness Podcast, and I'm your host, Ange Davies. Drawing from my own journey of wins, stumbles, and honest revelations, I'll be bringing you raw, unfiltered conversations with experts and inspiring guests who've been there, lived it, and found a better way. Together, we'll cut through the noise and workshop what it really means to be well in today's workplace. No more choosing between success and sanity. No more sacrificing health for achievement. Whether you're struggling with burnout, searching for purpose, or simply ready to work smarter, not harder, you're in the right place. This is real talk about real solutions for real people. Let's get into it. Hello, friends. Welcome to the show. Today, we are diving into a topic that doesn't just impact how you feel at work, but it can quietly derail your entire career. And that topic is burnout. And I don't say that lightly. I have personally experienced burnout twice in my life. And I can tell you firsthand that recovering from it is not as simple as taking a weekend off or booking a holiday. It takes months, if not years, to fully rebuild your energy, focus, and confidence. And the second time I experienced burnout, it was so severe that I actually, as a lot of you know, left the corporate world altogether, not because of the pressure or the workload, but because I realized I wanted to help others prevent experiencing what I went through. And I'm not alone in having experienced burnout or feeling like people are on the edge or teetering on burnout. From an organizational perspective and a leadership perspective, burnt out employees are 63% more likely to take sick leave and 2.6 times more likely to actively seek a new job. So if you're a leader, making sure that your team are not feeling burnt out or keeping an eye on burnout is really, really important, and leading effectively. But what if we told you that burnout isn't just about exhaustion? It's quietly affecting your decision-making, your ability to think strategically, and even your chances of career progression. So there's a lot at stake when it comes to burnout. So today I'm going to unpack the real cost of burnout, the ways it could be slowing down your career without you even realizing it, and more importantly, how to stop it before it gets to that point. But before we get started, I wanted to define what burnout is, specifically as it relates to work. And why I think this is important is because the word burnout gets thrown around everywhere. And so I think it's really important that we start with a definition or a baseline. This might not be everyone's definition, but it's the definition that I'm going to use for the purposes of what we're talking about today. And it's the definition that the World Health Organization defines. So burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It's characterized by three key dimensions: emotional exhaustion, feeling depleted, drained, and unable to cope; depersonalization or cynicism, feeling detached, negative, or indifferent towards work; and reduced personal efficacy, a sense of failure, inefficacy, or lack of accomplishment. So burnout's not just about working long hours, it's a chronic state of stress that leads to emotional and physical exhaustion, reduced performance in some cases, and disengagement. It affects both mental and physical well-being, and it can take months or even years to recover from it if it's left unaddressed. So the stakes are high when we're talking about burnout. And I think the word is often flippantly used, but when you look at things like this definition that I've just shared with you, it shows you the real impact of what burnout can have and why it's so important to try and prevent it. I want to cover off on the hidden career costs of burnout. And often burnout creeps up on people without us even realizing. And a lot of these hidden costs are showing up until we get to breaking point and realize that we're actually at the point of burnout. So it's really not just feeling tired or overwhelmed. It has real measurable effects on performance, reputation, and career trajectory. And here is how. Let's cover off decision-making and productivity decline to start with. So burnout affects your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for problem-solving, decision-making, and rational thinking. You might find yourself struggling to make decisions, missing details, or feeling paralyzed over simple tasks. An example of this is that a burnt-out leader may become reactive instead of strategic, which can harm long-term career opportunities. So you think about you feeling burnt out, you're struggling to make decisions and be rational, and then we're just reacting to all of the fires that are around us rather than taking a moment to stop and respond in the most productive way possible. The second way is through creativity and innovation being blocked. When you're mentally exhausted, your ability to think outside the box significantly diminishes. And research shows that chronic stress shrinks the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain involved in memory and learning, which is wild to think about. Chronic stress can shrink a part of your brain responsible for memory and learning. And this is actually why when we are in very stressful situations or perhaps experience trauma, the brain actually doesn't lay down memories effectively. So that's really interesting and super important to know. And I think, if you've ever noticed that when you're rested, your ideas flow. Have you ever been on holiday or you're feeling well rested or you're just sort of sitting out in nature and you notice there's so many creative ideas that flow? But when you're burnt out, even brainstorming feels like it's impossible. Like you can't come up with any new ideas. And then the final way that burnout impacts your career is through reputation and leadership impact. Chronic burnout can make you seem disengaged, unreliable, or even overly negative, whether you mean to or not. And the irony is, high performers who always push through may end up being overlooked for leadership because they appear too drained or too overwhelmed to take on more responsibility. So that's a really interesting mindset shift. And I think very often we think by being the high performer, pushing through, always working, always busy, that that's going to guarantee us a look in for our next role or a leadership role, but it can actually do the opposite and make people think that this person doesn't have capacity to take on that next level up. So what are the early warning signs of burnout? Because ideally, we want to be able to recognize these early warning signs before the burnout becomes an issue. And most people, me included, don't realize that they're burned out until it's too late. So here are some early red flags to watch out for to make sure you don't get to that full level of burnout. The first one is emotional detachment and cynicism. Feeling indifferent about work, feeling indifferent about your colleagues or projects that you once cared about. That's a major warning sign of burnout. And I want to call out that the three things that I'm going to talk to you about in terms of warning signs of burnout don't mean that you're on your way to burnout. There can be other systemic things that are causing you to feel this way. Sometimes poor culture and leadership can also cause emotional detachment and cynicism. But they're just things to keep an eye on and notice. And if you start to feel these things, then certainly just checking in and seeing if burnout could be a cause is really important. So emotional detachment and cynicism is the first one. The second one is increased mistakes and forgetfulness. Burnout impacts your ability to focus and retain information. So as I was saying earlier, that chronic stress shrinks the hippocampus, responsible for memory and learning. So burnout is going to make you forgetful and it's going to make it more difficult to retain information. If you're making avoidable errors, take it as a signal that you could be on the brink of burnout. And the third one is persistent exhaustion despite rest. So if weekends, holidays, or a full night's sleep don't seem to make a difference and you're feeling like you're still low on energy, that's a signal that you could be on the verge of burnout and that your energy reserves are depleted. So another one that's really important to look out for. So I'll just recap on those three: emotional detachment and cynicism, increased mistakes and forgetfulness, and persistent exhaustion despite rest. So how do we stop burnout before it costs you all of the things I spoke about earlier? Now that we've identified the problem, let's have a talk about some solutions. How are we stopping burnout before it can negatively impact your career? And a lot of these tips I share throughout Instagram and in other podcasts, but these ones are very specific to helping to prevent and recover from burnout. The first one is micro recoveries throughout the day. So a lot of people think if I save up all my annual leave and go on one big holiday at the end of the year, then I'm going to be able to prevent burnout. But that's just not the case. We need multiple micro recoveries to help our brains rest and reset. Because the way that we currently work is not the way that our brains are actually designed to work. Our brains are not designed to be switched on and focused for the full 8, 9, 10, 12-hour workday, whatever workday you're working. Our brains aren't designed to work in that way. And so having micro recovery throughout the day is really important. The science shows that a 90-minute working cycle and working in focused bursts with intentional breaks is one of the best ways to work. So 90 minutes of intense focused work and then having maybe a 5, 10 or 15-minute break after that. I know a lot of people use something called the Pomodoro method. And if you haven't heard of that, that's a 25-minute work cycle and a 5-minute break. So just assess what type of work you're doing. Sometimes if there was deep project work that I was doing, a 25-minute work stint just wasn't long enough. And I found that once I got really deep into it, that I was time for a break again. So 90 minutes can be really good if you're doing that really deep thinking work. Otherwise, if it's sort of small tasks, admin, those sorts of really mindless tasks, a 25 and 5 split is really good. Even 5 minutes of movement or deep breathing can reset your nervous system and restore focus. So I will die on the hill of 10 squats every hour. You could do it every 90 minutes if you're doing your 90-minute working cycle, or take 3 rounds of those Stanford breaths. Big inhale, extra sip of air, fully empty out the lungs. You could do 5 rounds of that. The second way to help to prevent and recover from burnout is implementing boundaries without guilt. Setting limits with emails, meetings, and availability does not make you a bad employee. It makes you a sustainable one and an engaged one and a high-performing one, because you're not distracted by all of these interruptions and meetings for the sake of meetings. So if you want to do this, you can go back and actually listen to episode 1 of this podcast, which is how to say no. And I give some very, very practical ways on how to set boundaries, particularly from a work perspective, and some exact sentences and applications of saying no. The third one is redefining success and what sustainable high performance work looks like. And a lot of people say work smarter, not harder. And what I mean by that is working smarter around your well-being. So, there's been, I guess, a lot of rhetoric around, oh, that's, a fallacy, but it's not. Working harder without looking after your well-being is not going to get you sustained success. Try saying that 5 times over. It's just not going to happen. It has an expiry date. And the fact is that the highest performing executives don't grind 24/7. They optimize their energy and their focus. And something I want to really share with you here is around talking about energy and focus and what high performance looks like. Choosing the tasks you do in your high energy state. So my high energy state is in the morning. And if I've got tasks that I want to be doing in the morning, I am not doing the menial admin tasks. So many of us look at a list and we think, let me tick off the easy things to do so I feel like I've got some momentum. I understand that thinking. If you're lacking motivation, it helps to build that movement and that motion, but you're actually wasting the best part of your brain by doing tasks that you could be doing when you're low on energy. Doing your admin, doing your emails, you can do that when you're low on energy. Do your big thinking, important work and tasks when you have your highest energy. And that's a really good way to redefine what high performance is using your energy to your advantage rather than just continuously grinding throughout the day. So to recap, burnout isn't just about feeling tired. It affects our decision-making, our innovation and creativity, and ultimately it can negatively impact career progression. Recognizing the early warning signs can prevent long-term damage and help get in ahead of severe burnout. And sustainable success comes from smart energy management, not constant hustle. I'm going to say that again because I think it's really important. Sustainable success comes from smart energy management, not constant hustle. So a final quote to leave you with, and I am sure many of you have heard this quote or seen it on Instagram or Pinterest, and that is, if you don't take time for your wellness, you will be forced to make time for your illness. And it is so, so true. The book that I'm going to recommend today is The Burnout Fix by Dr. Jacinta Jimenez. It's a really great science-backed guide to building resilience and preventing burnout, and it's one that I would recommend if it's something that you would like to read more on. So there's been lots of tips in there. I encourage you to think about what burnout is. Take some time to think about those early warning signs that I mentioned. Really assess, are you feeling disengaged, disconnected? Are you still feeling tired after rest? Are you lacking creativity? Is it difficult for you to make decisions? And get in early to looking after yourself and doing those 90-minute work cycles or prioritizing that big work when your energy is high and those menial admin tasks when your energy is low, because burnout is something that can be prevented. But if we don't get in early and prevent it, it can have a really detrimental impact, not just on our career, but on our personal life as well. I hope today's episode has resonated. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining me on Work and Wellness. If today's episode resonated with you, remember, someone in your network might need to hear this too. Share it with a colleague or friend who could use these insights. I'd love to keep the conversation going, so find us on Instagram at Mind Your Grit, where we share daily tips and continue these discussions. And if you found value in today's episode, please take time to rate and review the show. It makes such a huge difference and helps other people discover conversations they might really need. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Each week, we're building a community of people who believe that success and well-being go hand in hand. You can find the notes, resources, and links from today's episode at mindyourgrit.com. This is Work and Wellness with Davies. Your work matters, your wellness matters, and this is where it all comes together. See you next week.